All right, for today's classic interview, we're going back to my October of 2014 interview with adult film director Dave Pounder, not his real name, as you can probably imagine. We actually had a really interesting conversation about these issues that can come up, not only for adult film performers, but for people in other stigmatized industries as well. When they try to get jobs in the future, we talked about indecency, we talked about censorship, and so many interesting issues. So I don't know why the day of Donald Trump's inauguration made me want to revisit an interview with a porn director called Dave Pounder. You make the connection. I'm not really sure why, but that is today's classic interview. Let's take a look. I'm joined today by Dave Pounder, who is a retired adult film producer, director, performer, also author of the book Obscene Thoughts, A Pornographer's Perspective on Sex, Love, and Dating. Dave, it's great to have you. You know, one thing I want to start with is we have a couple of these stories, one from 2011 where a Los Angeles traffic officer was fired for having appeared in a porn film. In 2013, there was this middle school science teacher, Staci Haleys, who was fired after appearing in a porn film. They had appeared in legal employment. They had not done anything that was against the law, yet they were fired. Let's start there. Was this something that people in the industry think of when they decide to participate in adult films?
Most people that come into the business are pretty young, particularly the girls are probably 18 to 23, generally speaking. And I think most of them are pretty naive in life at that time. So they don't really think about the long-term implications of the decisions that they make more generally, not so much just in employment, but maybe in mate selection and other things that they do in life. Now, granted, I was fully aware of that there would be sort of social consequences, if you will, for being involved with the adult film business, but I welcomed those challenges. Part of my decision to get into the adult film industry was to take someone like myself that has a perfectly, legitimate background in the sense that I'm well educated, I have no criminal background, not involved with drugs, etc., to sort of challenge that social stigma and say, there isn't anything wrong with sexuality. It's perfectly natural, and people shouldn't be discriminated against merely because in one life, not just the adult film industry, but maybe they went to a swingers club with their partner, or maybe they were just a dancer, or maybe they were a nude model for a painting class. It really depends what people's definition of, pornography is. It's a very subjective decision. If you and your wife make a video and you don't distribute it, are you a pornographer? By some standards you are. By other standards you're not. What if you make a video and you put it up on the web on a server, but it never gets downloaded? Is the fact that you made it available for download enough to, call you a pornographer and then, have you dismissed from a job?
Well, there's those specifics with regard to what we could all agree kind of falls under that umbrella, but then there's even more gray area. I mean, what if someone were to be an actor in an R-rated movie that was particularly explicit, right? It pushed the boundaries of what would be allowed in terms of sexual content in an R-rated movie, or maybe it was NC-17, but in another country, it was the equivalent of R-rated. We're opening up this, and I hate to call slippery slopes when I don't think they exist, but we really are opening up a slippery slope here, aren't we?
Oh, absolutely. And to add to your list of analogies there is you think about somebody who has a non-sexual role in an adult film.
Right, or a technical role even.
Or say you're behind the scenes, you're a cameraman, or you rented out your location to be used, and your employer says, "Hey, isn't that so and so's house? I was at the Christmas party last year," and they weren't even involved in the production. They left the house, they received income, legitimate legal income, reported it to the IRS, paid taxes, and now they're going to lose their job. There was a guy in Florida named Scott Jenke. He was a town manager. He was employed by the city, and his wife, not him, but his wife had made an adult movie, and they fired him, not because he did anything unlawful, not that even his wife did anything unlawful, but just the mere fact that his wife was in the adult film industry as an actress and had made a few movies. That was grounds for terminating him from his publicly held position. Now, he wasn't elected, but he was an employee of a public entity. And the government, they say that you have First Amendment protections to freedom of expression, freedom of speech, etc. Here you have these public institutions that are terminating people for perfectly lawful off-duty conduct.
Well, I was focusing on that when I was researching and kind of preparing to talk to you, which is, so we're talking about lawful activity. That's the primary thing. So then what really is it about the participation in the adult films that would cause a company to dismiss someone? And we're really talking about either offense or we're really talking about hang-ups and social stigmas, right? Because we've
Absolutely.
eliminated the possibility that it's an illegal action. And if
Correct.
you think that down those lines, many people would be highly offended given the negative impact that the fossil fuels industry is having on our planet right now and on our society, about somebody working in that field. But we're really talking about the same type of arbitrary decision, right? You could be offended that somebody was working in an adult film in kind of the same way that you could be offended that somebody participated in the fossil fuels industry, which is having such a negative impact on society. And I think if we gave that example, people would realize how absurd this is.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the idea is, think about somebody who works for, Anheuser-Busch, or I guess is InBev now, right?
Sure.
If I'm the owner of InBev and I'm creating alcoholic beverages, which some religions like say Mormonism have an opposition to drinking alcohol, it's immoral under their tenets of their law. Here's a guy that's creating a product that contributes to, kidney disease, or I'm sorry, liver disease, all the domestic violence that comes from that, DUIs, deaths on the highway. Nobody has ever died from an overdose of pornography. And morality is very subjective, right? Like for me, I'm an animal rights person. I think that hunting and killing another animal and taking away another life is immoral. Yet it's lawful. And as an employer, as a public employer, I shouldn't be able to fire someone just because they're a hunter. I mean, we live in the United States where this is supposed to be a society where we have the First Amendment not to protect speech that you enjoy. We don't need the First Amendment to say I love you. We need the First Amendment to say I hate you. And the thing is even though, I may have to tolerate hunters that violate my personal morality, but in exchange for my tolerance of hunting and just sort of abuse to animals, in my view, somebody else has to tolerate, their personal, moral objections to sexuality. I mean, if you look at Janet Jackson, right, she had the wardrobe malfunction at the Super Bowl, merely just exposed the breast. There was no sexuality, nothing. And it was a huge national news story about where is this country going, because we showed a perfectly natural breast, right? And there was Jimmy Kimmel did a spoof on that with Al Jazeera, and they had all these people in Iran dancing around in full burqas, and a sleeve falls off.
Right.
Forearm is exposed, and everybody freaks out, and Al Jazeera like goes nuts, and the Americans laugh at that and go, "Wow, isn't that silly that they have to dress like that and cover a forearm?" Meanwhile, the Europeans are looking at our Janet Jackson incident, where the Europeans have commercials of naked women showering topless for a shampoo commercial, and they look at us and think, look at those silly Americans. And the other interesting thing to look at is the societies that are more tolerant of sexuality actually have the best rights towards women. If you look at countries like the Netherlands or Western Europe or the Nordic countries, or even Canada, they have some of the best treatment between men and women, yet in most of these prostitution is legal, pornography is legal, etc. Where you look at societies where women's rights are not the best, access to abortion, etc., those have the most constrained constrictions on women's behavior, whether that's Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, or even here in the United States. Our women's rights here are less than they are in Canada and Western Europe, and you can see that our level of sort of sexual tolerance or even women's sexual empowerment is directly correlated with that level of freedom. So
Well,
the more
with regard to the employment, though, just to
Sure.
get back on that, what we're really dealing with here in the U.S. is a situation where most people are employees at will, right? So no matter what our perception of, oh, it's silly to fire someone because they worked for InBev rather, and that creates so many car accidents, or they worked in porn, very few people are in unions, and most people are just employees at will.
Sure. Now, you're talking about a private-public distinction. So in most states in the U.S., you can fire somebody merely because you don't like the color of their shirt. You can say, you're wearing a green shirt, you're fired. And the match to that is that an employee can quit for any reason or for no reason. What I'm trying to do is to apply this to the public employers, in the sense that to say, if everybody's paying taxes, right, the only beef that an employer can have as a public employer is someone who's doing something unlawful. because everything else that's within the purview of the law should be acceptable to a public employer since everyone has to pay taxes. If I work for Burger King, and they fire me because I was in the adult film industry, I can retaliate in the sense that I can stop consuming Burger King products. I can go to McDonald's or Wendy's. However, if, say, a school district or a city discriminates against you, right, you can't stop paying taxes. You can't say, I don't like the way the school board is operating. Let me stop paying taxes to the schools. I'm still mandated to pay taxes to the schools and the property values. Therefore, if I'm mandated to pay taxes and I have no option, regardless of how the school board is performing, then these public employers should not be permitted to fire people for the sort of the subjective moral choices that go against the public employer. Think of it like this. Let's say you're a principal of a school and you have two teachers. Say one of them, got a dog from a dog breeder over the weekend, and you think as an animal rights person that, that dog breeders are bad and people should adopt from shelters. If you're going to allow, say, public schools to arbitrarily fire teachers who had been in the adult industry or even who are currently in the adult industry, that's no different from that principal saying, I've decided I'm going to fire this English teacher because she adopted a dog from the pound. And meanwhile, I'm going to fire this science teacher because they drink alcohol on the weekends. And I had a son who died in a DUI, and I feel bad about that. So they're fired arbitrarily. That's the issue. Now, there are states like Colorado, North Dakota, California, and New York that have state statutes that protect what they call lawful off-duty conduct. And this also applies to private employers. So in the sense to my earlier argument that it's an at-will employment situation, that's true, but not when it comes to protected classes like race,
of course,
religion, gender, race, etc. And I think that, in my view, which might be a little more progressive, is I think that lawful off-duty conduct or conduct within the law on your own time should actually be a protected class because so many people are adversely affected by employment decisions as a result of stuff that has nothing to do with their job based on the arbitrary morality of a certain administrator at the organization.
We've been speaking with Dave Pounder. The book is Obscene Thoughts, a pornographer's perspective on sex, love, and dating. Really great to have you on. Very interesting topic.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.